Hello, guys. Welcome to the rainy Sunday comic book show. And it is pouring out there. It is exactly what a rainy Sunday is supposed to be. And we've had a death in the comic book industry. Definitely an end of an era. Someone that I've talked about on here before over the years and have met at Heroes Con several times over the years. And just to say that when I was reporting those incidents with this person, I was talking about someone alive. And I'm going to hold on to those memories because when someone passes away, we tend to want to talk nicely about them and not talk ill of the dead and everything because they're not here to defend themselves or anything like that. But I choose to remember people, all of it, good, bad, ugly, warts and all. So it's just kind of a hit, and it's very odd with the timing of Neal Adams passing. That's who we're talking about here, because I had a death. If you watched my show last week, I had a death in my family, and what I didn't say a week or two before that was I had a childhood friend a year younger than me pass away from an unexpected stroke. So I've had a lot of things on my mind here lately about mortality and legacy and stuff. And anybody that's watched my channel for a great length of time, I used to get quite philosophical, pulling from these stories, finding these comic books to frame some ideas about life and things like that. And so I had this whole idea about this talk I just wanted to sit down and have on here, and needed something to anchor it, to make it real for people, relatable. And then Neal Adams passed away. The news came out that very afternoon when I found out, and it has sent shockwaves. Um, 80 years old, uh, sepsis, and he's one. This is one of the few times that we can talk about somebody who really left a huge legacy on their merits and their own personal code, the way they lived their life, it seemed, and everything. Right. Um, just to kind of frame some of this, um, one of the things I'm going to be bringing up here is this simple little picture about art. This is a postcard by Chris Bacalo from 1996, and believe it or not, this was actually mailed to me. Not this very one. I had to replace it. This was actually mailed to me from a comic book shop in 1996, asking if I was going to pick up my books from a comic book shop that was over an hour away. And that's what kind of sparked all of this with everything that's going on out there. But to talk about Neal Adams, Neal Adams was in my house as a kid, and it was Dead Man. The stepdad seemed to have this. He had the strange adventures, the brave and bold, and he had a little bit to say about Neal Adams. And basically, it was the DC Neal Adams that was mostly what I was exposed to him here. Of course, this is a 1983, 1984 Baxter series that reprinted on Baxter paper and better coloring these on the best paper at the time. The Neal Adams stories were basically, I guess, what was it called? The Fugitive. Basically, you had a TV show of a doctor who had been framed by the man with a hook for a hand, had framed him for the murder of his wife and Harrison Ford. It ended up becoming a movie with Harrison Ford in it years later. But Dead Man was basically about Boston Brand, who was an acrobat at a circus. This was his costume, ironically, and he was shot. So he was shot. He was sniped during his performance on the trapeze. He was a trapeze artist, I guess, right? And he quickly got the setting of he was now in phantom form and he could possess bodies, and he got real way in there. So this was the first time I saw Neal Adams. And of course, the first thing you see is the artwork and what he brought, and this is what inspired tons of people in to do art and probably get into comics. And there's been many people who are from this school of trying to draw like Neal Adams or emulating him or homaging him or whatever it is. But that's the thing. Neal Adams was um, totally just a legend almost immediately because of his work. There's the hook. Um, and this stuff is just beloved. And this was a guy that was going back and forth between Marvel and DC, between companies. Um, Before that, I think he was doing like Archie comics or something, right? So just to give you an idea, he was doing things like the Kree Scroll War, which I think I have something to show here in a minute. Little run on the Avengers that became legendary. The way he would draw these characters in almost a photorealistic style. He had an advertisement background. So yeah, Dead Man was probably my first exposure to the Neal Adams. And what got me is that there are people that just went nuts over his art, and they've been fans. I actually know people who've been fans for decades. I know some people that have been there since the beginning. Okay, then he was also on the X-Men. He came in there, and I think it was again with Roy Thomas. I have to go look in there. And he created characters like Havoc, Polaris, played around with costume designs, brought this, this dynamic, photorealistic. The Neal Adams probably didn't blow me away because I knew about the Mick Caniff and what's his name? Mick Caniff, all the guys that did comic strips and stuff on Flash Gordon, Alex Raymond, Al Williamson and stuff. But you get Neil Gaiman that comes in here, and he had like a slightly dynamic style on there where things were just a little bit off. And it created a drama to it when you saw this exaggeration of facial features and the deep blacks and everything. Here's the Kree Scroll War. I have, like I said, they reprinted it also. So it was really fascinating to see all these Kirby-esque characters, cartoony characters, Steve Ditko designs, blocky styles. And all of a sudden here comes a guy who's sort of drawing them proportionately real with this amazing perspective and these deep blacks and stuff, right? So for this, and then of course, what I think he's most famous for is his Batman work with Denny O'Neil coming on there doing covers for DC. And they pretty much saved the Batman books with Denny O'Neil, and they brought up real social issues through story, even though some may have been a little heavy-handed at times to get the point across in the story with Denny O'Neil. And of course, we're talking about the Green Arrow, Green Lantern stuff. I didn't pull that out. Tracking across America because Green Lantern was a conservative who stayed in the stars, and Green Arrow was a ruined millionaire who was very left wing at a time, very 60s, 70s hippie influenced, bearded beatnik stuff. Very different era. And I totally always got what they were trying to get across with that story and how they brought comics, helping them grow up, brought to comics some serious issues to get people thinking. Which was always sort of saw Denny O'Neil as the liberal. In the few times that I met Neal Adams, I don't know if he was political, but he came off, he'd be the conservative, considering that he always wore a tie in a suit, a tie and a button-up shirt, and always showed up like he was working for an office, very professional. Now, like I said, the thing about Neal Adams, you can just kind of look at his work. He understood body language and everything. He made Robin like this little tough guy ready for a fight. He brought a darkness back to Batman that was needed after the Batman 66. But for me, and it's probably because of my age and the era that I was there, but Continuity Comics was something that Neal Adams started in 1984, his own company, if you will, after he'd spent years saying the comics needed a union and talking about creators' rights. Basically, he was the guy that, with his ego, from what I met, of course, he was like, am I not seeing comments? Of course, he, there we go. Of course, he decided he was one of those people that decided that he went back and forth. He knew about page rates, what both companies were doing, Marvel and DC. He could compare things. He could make little phone calls and be able to work the system and everything. But it was with the Superman movie that I think a lot of people knew there was a bit more to Neal Adams, the 1978 Superman movie, because Joe Siegel and Shuster, the guys that had created Superman, have been getting screwed for years. And he's the one that helped them get some royalties and helped them get paid a little bit. He's the one that made a big stink about, creators' rights and working for companies and things that you were doing and stuff, right? The guy had nothing to lose. He knew that. The thing about it is that Neal Adams knew who Neal Adams was. He knew he sold books. He knew He knew that he had a following. He knew that he could back up everything he had to say. But I found his indie stuff, right? Here's Anything Goes with Cerebus dressed up like my favorite character created by him, by Neal Adams, Armor. This is a metallic sheath, black sheath bodysuit, and every piece of it is magnetized onto his body, and he can pull off pieces and make weapons out of those. And plus, he had a sci-fi kung fu style. He would end up having he just kept adding on to it. He really was able to make comic. He always thought he was making comics fun no matter what, but just adding things on them, making things look very cool. Pleased to meet you. I hope you guessed my name. It's Rage. I mean, there's some things that he just kind of cracked me up on a little bit. But the man was always dynamic. He could do things that would catch your eye. And he was always innovative. He's one of the few artists that always got better and better with what they were doing. Amazing stuff. I totally get it. But but like I said, his legacy is boundless. He's probably one of 3 or 4 people that can. What is going on here? All right. But he's one of like, I see Eisner, I see Kirby, I see people who this is exactly what they were meant to do. They had a talent that nobody else actually had. They had that it factor. It's almost like it was destiny for these guys to get into comics and bring some validation to it and demand respect for it. Neal Adams was definitely like, just because we're artists, we still are people. But like I said, meeting him in person and live, completely different story. And one of my buddies, Tim Anderson, and I were having a conversation. Awesome. We were having a conversation last night. I'm glad Hippie is here. Hippie Collectibles here was one of the first guys I was worried about when I heard of Neal Adams. And years ago, I don't remember it, Hippie, but we had a conversation where Hippie had pictures and signatures and everything and got behind the table and had a good time with him and had great. And my interaction and a couple other people's actions were completely different from his. And I think it's that ego that made him a great artist. You know what I mean? And he had tons of respect for certain people in the industry that I heard at Baltimore Con and Heroes Con. Morning, guys. And the biggest thing is of all people that I heard Neal Adams say he had tons of respect for was Stan Sakai, the guy that does Usagi Yojimbo. And he's the one that I heard him talking while I was in the area. It wasn't eavesdropping. I was there, and he just sort of started on a new conversation. But he had tons of respect for Sakai over Usagi, and he said that one of the biggest secret stories behind the scenes of comics has been the media fight for Usagi Yojimbo, which blew my mind. Then I heard some other people talking about it, if I'm remembering this right, because he had held on to his creation. And he hadn't sold out, and he had multiple offers for cartoons and movies and video games and all sorts of things, apparently. And he was very protective and made good choices. And Neal Adams had huge. Now, after I heard him talk about this, I started hearing other people when I would talk about how they actually see Neal Adams run up to Sakai and shake his hand and everything. So when it comes to merit and talent and being an artist, everything like that, Neal Adams really seemed to come off with sort of a code of honor that probably he only understood that he may have lived his life with and stuff. And that's the kind of stuff I picked up on, besides the art and the books and everything. Now, like I said, it was really odd with the timing of him passing away, because for you guys jumping in, I had my grandfather pass away last week, and about 2 weeks ago, I had a childhood friend a year younger than me pass away. It actually got me thinking about things as I close up here on 50 and stuff, right? But back in the 90s, when I had my own apartment, and I was working weird night shifts, and I was doing weekend warrior stuff with the National Guard, where I sort of come out of the Army, let's just say. and all this stuff. But I had this mailed to me because my comic book shop was an hour away. I've recently replaced this, and what it is, it's Neil Gaiman's death, right? And with everything going on, it was really odd for me to have ordered this and found this on eBay, and then have all these things happen with what's going on. And this came in, but if you were around in the '90s, Neil Gaiman's Sandman was right there with its hand on the pulse. Hand on the pulse of the '90s, very goth, very kind of dark and stuff. Fantastic Chris Bachalo art. So they were starting to. Sandman had really popped with issue 8 when Death popped up. And Death had actually been portrayed as a Mary Poppins kind of person, somebody you want to meet, somebody you want to hang out with. And it was based on a real girl by the artist. And her name really escapes me. But the Death's look was based on her looks and her everything. Somebody might pop in here and remember her name. And she also passed away. But what was really wild is I think I was dating somebody or something, but they did something really cool where they took this postcard asking if I was going to come pick up my books or not. I think the comic book shop guy might have pissed me off or something. I can't remember. I still talk to him. Been going to shop over 30 years here and every now since like 1988, 89. But anyway, he had sent this, and then the girl that I'd known had a picture frame, and it was kind of 3D, whatever you want to say. It was raised, sculpted sunflowers around it, and the contradiction between looking at the two was just amazing. I'm like, that's the most '90s thing I'd ever seen, taking the sunflowers. If you were around in the '90s, you would know that if it had a bird, it would have been a crow. If it had a flower, it would have been a sunflower. I mean, so it was the '90s, the last great bastion of culture, I think. Yeah, infrared media. This is what I'm getting at. It's odd. I don't usually get affected by celebrity deaths, but this one really strung, Yeah, because it's definitely an end of an era. There are people that I've seen posting about Neal Adams passing away, saying it's really odd that in the entire lifetime, from the time they were born, Neal Adams was there putting out work in some form or another, and now they're living in a time where he's finally gone. It's definitely an end of an era. But the Neil Gaiman death here, the first time I saw a dead body, just to put it bluntly, is I was like about maybe 4 years old. I had woke up in the morning. We had company when I went to bed upstairs in this house we were renting. And I'd woke up and I looked across the hall, and the other bedroom was open. And I saw this guy's head laying back and a puddle of vomit behind him. And I assumed he just OD'd. It was the late 70s. I figured it was drugs. I was aware of drugs then. And then it turned out, I think I got told it was an epileptic seizure years later when I asked about it and stuff. Now, what this did is it didn't make me morbid or fascinated by death or anything, but what it did is it made me realize you need to live while you can. Is this the best way to put it? I could go through the whole journey of trying to find those words as a kid and everything. So growing up, it was like, read everything you can, listen to everything you can, watch everything you can, get out and play everything you can. So that's why we were outside, and comics played a huge part of this, right? So then all of a sudden this beautiful picture comes in of something that should be dark and morbid. It was actually this character that made Sam Keith leave Sandman books and have the Max come out. There's actually an episode of Max where he makes a little statement talking about the sand people in high school. They were all goth kids, and had a character throwing, I don't know what it was. It was like wads of wet paper or something at a picture of a Chris Bachalo death picture, because Max creator Sam Keith thought death should be scary and not something fun that invites people to want to see her, while Neil Gaiman was attitude, the statement was death's nothing to be afraid of. So you get deep philosophical thoughts when you just look at something, even from a postcard, and you think about the contradictions and everything in it, and hear people talk about it from the outside, and you can hear everything. Good morning. So, 80 years old, Neal Adams has passed away. And in those 80s years, I think it's obvious that he packed many things in there. For a lot of people, and they've been posting on Facebook, and I had a friend with one of my friends, people were a little back and forth about talking about him because they had such bad experiences when they met him in person. Yet what he's going to be remembered for, as he should, is this legacy of what he brought to comics and saving franchises and coming up with ideas and creators' rights, and you can go on and on. And I kind of put him with Jack Kirby, to a certain extent. because his influence was so big, much like Kirby, that it goes beyond comics, and you probably see it in everything. You know, and you don't even know it. Kirby influenced Star Wars because he influenced George Lucas. If you go back and look at some of his Forever People, he created virtual reality in that, much like the great sci-fi novelist of the 19th century. There, they were predicting submarines and things like that. He was predicting technology and things moving forward. And then you have Neal Adams, who just comes in and this huge validation for the hobby that you're doing. You could actually show his artwork and it would blow people away. But in one of these mini documentaries of comics that I have over here on DVD, or maybe you're on something, or maybe it's on some little extra on a DVD comic book movie or something, DC movie or something. But Neal Adams blew me away because he interviewed very good. He always showed up in his tie, his suit. He was always clean cut. Didn't look like some guy living in a basement at his drawing board that never got out or anything. He presented very well, which I think is important. Presentation counts for a lot, especially with this hobby. And he brought a dignity to it just with his presentation. And then he broke things down. He held up a pencil and he said, "You see this right here, my hand in this pencil, especially my hand?" He said, "That's a $100 million movie right there, $1 billion movie right there. That's where it all comes from." So he always expected comics to get their due, and the creators to get their due. So, of course, people have grown up with him. Like Infrared Media was saying, it feels kind of weird. And what I'm seeing is that there are people who Neal Adams was always there. There are bands that we hear on the radio and things we see on TV. There's people that they were always there, were comfortable. It's like they were always going to be there, and then they pass away. It always amazes me when I've had people like David Bowie, Bernie Wrightston, Christopher Reeve, Charles Schultz. There's been certain celebrities that have passed away, and I'd be walking, oh man, Alex Toth, Doug Wadley, some of these other guys. I mean, there was a comic book artist, I'm pretty sure it was Alex Toth, that I was at work, saw the news and kept working. And I had my friends walk up to me throughout the day, co-workers, let's say, came up to me during the day asking if I was all right because it was really bothering me on some level. I think it's sad when people who are creative and they put positive things into the world pass away because nature usually hates a void, and there's people that will come in and fill those holes, those roles that people leave behind. You don't see a lot of that at all, and I think that's a big problem. That's one of the things that scares me about comics to a certain extent, and about legacy and what people are leaving behind. Mm-hmm. So we can sit here and you have Neil Gaiman's death. You have Batman, Dead Man, everything that I've sat here and shown. And then you can have like all this work behind you and stuff. And then you have like the comic book industry of today. Oh, this is cool. Yeah, I can touch on this. Frank Miller and Bill Sienkiewicz credited Adams for helping them get their foot in the comic book door. His influence was beyond the beautiful art. If you go back and look at early Sienkiewicz published work, especially in a little run in Fantastic Four he did, he was drawn almost exactly like Neal Adams. And then he ended up getting his own style going there through Moon Knight. Another person that I've heard Neal Adams comment on, and Frank Miller comment on a little bit, but Frank Miller really talks more about Will Eisner and things, is the fact that Neal Adams really had a huge influence, I think, on Frank Miller also. Frank Miller had a few comments, I think, that Neal Adams really was real critical and stuff, in a positive, in constructive criticism. And Neal Adams' comment was he needed discipline. The guy needed discipline. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. When you talk about Neal Adams' influence in comics, it's too big, and it leaked over, like I said, into the real world. I mean, we have films by like RoboCop 2, RoboCop 3, Sin City movies Frank Miller wrote, and you can see the Eisner in it and stuff like that. And there's the fact that Neal Adams had a hand in all that also, as things are getting big. If you really want to see some interesting stuff, Neal Adams, probably in his prime. It's hard to say. It's hard to say that Neal Adams was ever in his prime because he always evolved as an artist, which I think is just fantastic. He was constantly drawing, constantly pushing stuff, constantly doing cons and everything. But if you want to go back, and you need to type into Facebook Mobius, John Buscema, and Neal Adams, because apparently there was a show from France that had come over here from over to New York. I think is where they did it in America. And they had a series of getting these artists together, and it was 20 to 30 minutes of each one taking a turn drawing on this great big huge mural with markers. Everybody would take their turn while you had a narrator speaking in French, talking about each one. And then they would all get together and they would make it into like a jam piece. And I got to watch, that's one of the great things I loved about YouTube. I got to watch Mobius, Neal Adams, and John Buscema. Oh, no, Joe Kubert, excuse me. Joe Buscema, John Buscema was another one. It was Joe Kubert, Neal Adams, and Mobius all getting together, and they're each drawing a character, then they all tie them together. And it was just fascinating to sit there and watch Neal Adams sit there and talk with Mobius, which was just fantastic. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. It seems like Neal Adams was very respectful of other artists. Like he came off like we're all in this together. He brought in a lot of artists and was always willing to say things. And when he had Continuity Comics, he had Terry Shoemaker and a bunch of these other guys working on their books that were coming out. But what I heard is that they were so slow coming out because Neal Adams would go over every page and either ink it or tweak it or something, so that every Continuity comic book had Neal Adams touched on it. And this is the kind of thing that kind of dulls people's minds if you really aren't into that stuff, right? But you got legacies out here like Neal Adams, Will Eisner, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee. And I know that not everybody can be a superstar out there. And I've also met artists who they were their own franchise to a certain extent. It's not so much that they were a company man, or for comics, they were making a living and wanting to do things on their own. And comic books was either a way to pay the bills on the side so they can try to do their real dream. And then there are some people who were like definitely into comics and this is their life. This is what they do. Apparently there's a lot of walks of life and a lot of facets out there about working in comics. But then you have people, like I said, like Neal Adams, who seems to try to did probably look at it as a job in a business, but he also had a passion for it. And that's when it becomes sort of an intangible. The guy was making a living doing it, yet he was so good, and the way his mind worked, he was always trying to improve things and bring up artists and keep it. It's almost like he was trying to keep it alive to a certain extent, you know. Now that he's passed, and now that I'm thinking about these things, all because of this little postcard that came in that took me back to my youth of the 90s and things like that, and having this in my house and the contrary things and just getting everything going. I kind of wished if I would have talked to him about how he viewed what he did. Was it a job? Was it a life? How did he look at it? How would he explain it to somebody? Because maybe it's one of those deals, maybe it was a job, but when you love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work. And that's how it came out. What engaged me as a kid about Neal Adams' drawings of Batman and Tarzan on the trade paperbacks was the physicality of the men on the page. It was like reviews, Marlon Brando on stage. It changed everything. Yeah. Everything, the dynamic artwork that he did, the testosterone-filled men and the elegant women. He could draw women that look like... oh my gosh, they look like they stepped off the Avengers TV show, Diana Rigg. And then he could do things where it looked like they stepped out of a 1940s film noir movie. The guy was so versatile with how he could set a mood and everything. And body language, things that were unspoken. I did see a few things that I thought he couldn't get the essence of, but that's also like saying that Jack Kirby just had a problem drawing Batman. It didn't really matter. Out of all the characters that I've seen Jack Kirby ever draw, it seems like he can never get a handle in my eyes on Batman. And it's not a slight, in the whole of his career. But when you look at people like who I mentioned, and Neal Adams, Jack Kirby, Will Eisner, all these big guys. Of course, not everybody can be a big superstar and a mover and shaker. And some people are looking at it as a job, or this is a stepping stone to something bigger. I mean, that it seems like comics are much more than what they could have been. It used to be like Sal Buscema talked about doing type pencils and for an audition, I guess, a sample of his work to start working at Marvel. And they told him, "You have the tightest pencils I have ever seen." And he's like, "Well, I wanted to make sure I got work." It's like he did too much in their eyes. And Sal Buscema is a freaking legend all on his own. Okay. But it seems like when I met him and saw him at Heroes Con and listened to one of his panels, it's like it was a job, and you got in there and you worked and worked, and you got paid for what you were able to put out. Then you have, like I said, somebody for Neal Adams who's an entrepreneur. It's an entrepreneur, it seems like, and stuff. Before those Image guys in '92, maybe they let a little. He didn't burn any bridges, it seems like, but he always seemed to keep a hand in. And then you have like today's artists, today's people who are in comics today and stuff and everything like that. And that's one of the things that kind of makes me kind of sad, because I'm sort of like, what kind of legacy are they leaving behind? Are they proud of what they're doing? Is this something that people are going to look back on? Like with Neal Adams, we have work you can look back over 50 years and look at, and are they going to be proud of the work they're putting out? And how much say do they have? Neal Adams helped make strides in people being able to do what they wanted, and getting royalties and recognized and creators' rights. He made huge strides for everybody. So maybe the working environment was set up to a certain extent by people like Dave Sim and Neal Adams and a few other people and stuff. But what kind of legacies are being behind today? Are they still? I mean, really, I don't see a lot of comics that people are even reading a month after they come out, let alone 10, 20, 30 years. And that's why I kind of worry about how long comics really be around. It's not a irrational fear. Every decade, people keep expecting comics to disappear or talk about it, or they're not going to be lasting much longer. But I have a real concern that there are a lot of things, if something doesn't change, if we don't get a Neal Adams, we don't get a new superstar, a new innovator, a new creative spark in there. I really wonder if we'll have comics past the 2030 decade. And Gore Vidal has spoken many times in the comments and stuff whenever I make a comment like that. So there's people who are kind of on board, but for different reasons also. There's a lot of zeitgeist there. But really, when you're coming out there, and some of the most popular YouTube channels of comics right now are just consistently, and I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, I'm reporting the weather. When it rains, it's not all bad. You know what I mean? But if I wanted to get huge views on here, I could just go totally negative on comics, buy a bunch of comics that I consider crap, review them, tear them up, keep going. And keep going like that, because there are more problems with the comic book industry today to where everybody is on board with this negativity. And then you have a ton of people who are just there for the drama because they don't even read the comics. And of course, you have the faction who are saying they're fine with how these comics are and how representation and everything should be, but they don't buy the comics. Thus, you have nobody to argue with when you point out why these suck. And then, of course, there are people who are completely fine and they are able to find and be apparently satisfied and content with the books they are able to find that are good, the good books and stuff. So it's very complicated, and it's hard to cover all walks of life and all perspectives of comics today. But what I'm trying to focus on is the fact is Marvel actually, the damage that the guys from Image did when they formed Image was it made comic book companies start being very hesitant of building up people and making them superstars. Having them be a name, and Neal Adams is one of those guys. Neal Adams was one of those guys. Also, he was a name, so he had a little bit of pull. He could walk off if he wanted to. Something's going on out there. But who are the people coming up today? A lot of people have been canceled. Warren Ellis, whatever. He's already moving away from comics and stuff, doing Castlevania and other things. But he's always done other stuff his entire career outside of comics. Neil Gaiman stuff's getting adapted. He's always been more of a novelist, even though he loved comics and stuff in the 80s and stuff. And I'm sure he still loves them. He still has his hand there, but he's always sort of overseeing things, supposedly, and stuff. Neal Adams has passed. Bernie Wrightson has passed. Stan Lee has passed. Jack Kirby has passed. All these people coming up. And then who are the people coming up that are the movers and shakers? Companies really have come across being very careful if they do make somebody a name. You have somebody leak like Bendis. And I swear I've been in places where as soon as I mentioned Bendis, they were like, "Oh, you said the name of he who will not be spoken." It seems like there's just certain people who I don't know. I don't know how they pick and choose who gets to be portrayed as the flagship creator for some of these companies. But I mean, really, as somebody who makes YouTube videos, there's only so many haul videos I can do where I feel like I'm making a point or doing anything. So with all this stuff going on, and all this being sparked by this little postcard that came in with death on there, and me getting older, I am hitting that little stage in life that everybody hits as of 7 billion people in the history of, you know, humans being alive. There's nobody having any kind of feelings, doubts, thoughts, or anything that anybody has. You're not the first. As somebody has, you're just going through stages and repeating things that other people have already done. But I feel like there's a reason for that. But I hit the point where I'm like, well, what do I want to say? I'm lucky enough to have probably about 10 to 15 videos over the years that I'm pretty proud of with what I said in them, you know. And it's a personal thing. Maybe you know what they are, maybe they don't. The first one you can look up is Reflections. I think that's what it was called, from like 2011 or 12, starting there. And then you have people like doing comics like Dave Sim doing their indie stuff, some Neal Adams stuff and everything like that. If they didn't say it in their work, they said it in their advocacy. And that was what I think Neal Adams really brought. The fact that he got Schuster and Siegel recognized and got them some royalties and stuff and got their names up there as creators of Superman in the movie and stuff like that. That's huge. That's huge for somebody to do that. Is almost altruist. I've never heard that Neal Adams ever gained anything from that. So what do you want to say? And the people working in comics today, like I tried to review and talk about stuff, as I would love to be in their head, but are they trying to say anything? You have guys like Joe Kubert, who, when he returned with Brian Azzarello, I believe, doing Sergeant Rock, he didn't comment on what Azzarello should have been doing in the story or what he was bringing. He just made it clear that he wished to have no cussing in it because he knew that his grandkids and family down generations after him may look at it. Very future oriented, as I can get at. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Are they even aware? Are they even trying to say anything? Because I feel like if you put heart, soul, emotion into a book, you get people. It's like the power of music. It emotes emotions and memories and makes people think things. And when you pull from that, and you're actually trying to say something, and you present it as a story, not as bias and stuff, you get to people think and to think about. I can go back and out of all the comics I've read, I always talk about Commandy and Starman and other works over here that you've watched me talk about and stuff. But the one series that I go back to and I'm right back in the moment and it feels like I'm visiting an old friend or family I haven't seen in years. I've been overseas and it's like I've come back and I picked them up, would be the Sandman stuff by Neil Gaiman. I didn't pick that. I did not pick that. The quality of the work, the storytelling, the era, the time, the age, everything that had come together. And that is the series that when I picked them up, I sat down and I'm visiting an old friend. How many books in the last 5 or 6 years can you honestly say has done that for you? And that's what I'm worried about. People can't plan that stuff. Some people can't. That's not something you don't sit down and be like, I want to make a legacy now or anything like that. But I think you should know when you're doing work that's going to mean nothing, at all. You're sitting there and it means nothing at all. I heard a story of Cindy Williams for any of you old timers that remember a show called Laverne and Shirley. But when they did the pilot, Cindy Williams apparently had the idea of like, oh, they're going to hate it. It's going to suck. They're not going to pick us up. And she didn't break down or anything, but it kind of commented that I think she thought what she was doing may not be very good. Wouldn't have been surprised if the show was not picked up. And of course it was picked up and it was sort of a hit, but you couldn't have predicted that. Well, that works both ways. So it worked both ways. You had Burt Ward on Batman playing Robin, And you had to have Adam West kind of give him a heads up of like, you might want to save that money. The show won't be around forever. It's sort of like Adam West was in on the joke, and he was aware what they were doing was camp and it was a niche audience. So he tried to give it an artistic validation for the 1966 Batman. And it worked. That validation in the way that he was aware of what he was doing. And I feel like a lot of comic book work that's going on today, they aren't aware of the cringe that they're putting out and what they're putting in there. They're being trendy or something, right? So let's look at the comments. I think I've said everything I wanted to say. I could go on. If I couldn't separate the art from the artist, my bookshelves, music, and film collections would be empty and quite boring. Yes, absolutely. I'm the same way, and I think there's a maturity of realizing that artists think in very different ways than we do. They view the world in very different ways that we do, and that would, of course, to me, affect how they are performing socially with people, because you have a whole different way of seeing the world and thinking about it, and that all is channeled into whatever artwork they're putting out, be it music, art, writing, anything. To me, it's a necessary, I hate to say flaw, but it's a necessary divergence from what we consider normal. And if you are somebody who appreciates art and appreciates all these things and gets into the mindset and are able to go somewhere else or to take yourself out of reality and immerse yourself into this stuff, it has an effect on you also like that. You've expanded your minds and used part of your brains that probably 99% of the people around you, I would guess, haven't evolved in that way either. I'm not saying you're more evolved. I've seen quite a few people stuck in adolescence, about 2 decades, 20 years after they shouldn't have. Peter Pans are what I call them. You have the Peter Pans. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation there to delve into and stuff, right? So basically what we've got here is when Bernie Wrightson passed away, I was like, we lost one of us. That guy was a comic book fan. That guy was an EC Comics fan. That guy went really way back. And then I sat there and I tried to put my finger on a little bit about Neal Adams. And it is very sad. It's an end of an era. And of course, we want to send our thoughts to the family and surviving members of the family. People have actually known him for years and everything like that. But like I said, there's a void there that will not be filled again, and that's not a good thing. That's usually these things are like, that's just how it is. Time moves on and everything, but this will not be a good thing. Inspiration, a code of honor, validity, dignity, presentation. He brought many, many more things than just his artwork, and he touched many, many, many people. And as I've looked at social media over the last couple of days, Instagram, Facebook, a little bit of Twitter, and then, like I said, I've talked to one or two of my friends. Everybody's affected that has read comics. Some people are having weird feelings because of meeting him in person. And I'm just, like I said, I'm like, everything, all of it goes together in my head. It was the whole person. It was because of that ego that he was able to help build a workspace for people where they got treated with a little bit more dignity, creators' rights and everything like that. It was that excitement that he put into his artwork where he had dynamic fight scenes and realistic, and then there was just pure talent. There's a lot of Neal Adams for a lot of people that's intangible because they just grew up with him and they've never really thought about what it is that inspires them or what they're a fan of. And that's the real, to me, you put all that together and the only word you can come up with is magic. It can't be explained and it won't be explained, you know. So yeah, the legacy, the merits, and the inspiration that Neal Adams brought just by doing his job is how I see it. I don't know if we'll ever see that again. So, I mean, in this context and where we're at. So, you know, let's just remember that we're lucky any of us here and everybody, a lot of us grew up with Neal Adams in comics. And let's just hope that people consider themselves lucky that come after this, that they're able to read and look at and absorb um, the entire works of Neal Adams that are out there for them now. You know, so not everything he hit out of the ballpark, uh, but not everything he did was repetitive. He took chances and stuff, right? Yeah, probably Neil Gaiman. I keep saying, now I was talking about Neil Gaiman's death. So I have two Neils I'm trying to talk about, and I'm sure where I'm live, I'm saying Neil Gaiman, Neal Adams, going back and forth. If you're in the know, you're in the know. If not, you can figure it out. Just the past week, I reread an old comic book artist magazine from the early 90s, exclusively about Neal Adams' 60s Marvel work. Incredible for the actual amount of work he produced. Exactly. When you look over the decades, what he put out, it's fantastic because of the quality of the work. But when you break down when he started out, it was a cover here, a short story here, a backup story in Aquaman, 6 or 7 Avenger comics over here, which ended up being remembered more than the next 30 that came out of it. You know what I mean? His quality of work was for what he was doing back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, he was just sticking around for a storyline here and a storyline there, except for Batman, of course, sporadic and things like that. But like I said, the amount of work, I put him up there with Jim Steranko. Jim Steranko actually did not put out that many comic books, but he came up with over something like 50. I don't remember. Somebody actually counted them up, but it was like 62 new storytelling techniques in comics in the short amount of books time that he was actually drawing comics and writing comics. He really didn't put out that much either. But Neil Gaiman's just been consistent with his quality for decades and stuff, be it pin-ups, covers, but actual runs on comics, you'll find very few. Anyway, thanks for popping in here, guys, and for all of you that are a little upset about Neal Adams and stuff, I feel for you. And like I said, he's going to be a fine. I was about to say this. Maybe I subconsciously saw this comment. Sandman, as we get older, is like aged wine. And that's what I was about to compare Neal Adams to with his work now. It just gets better. The final issue of Sandman was brilliant. Only Neal could come up with such a meaningful conclusion to an enchanting series, pulling from The Tempest. Neil Gaiman is alive and well. I'm going to have to change the title of this. Neil Gaiman's death. I meant the character death. Yeah. Great. That's fantastic. I'm causing a mini panic out there. So anyway, I'm going to be changing the name of this stream, adjusting it so people don't pop in here thinking Neil Gaiman has died. I better do that now. But anyway, hopefully we won't have any more deaths at all to hit the comic book industry. And I'm still preparing myself for what's going on with George Perez. So yeah, all we can do is just wait and see. So guys, you have a great Graphic Man popped in here. That's all right. Yeah, sorry to hear about Gaiman. Just kidding. That's hilarious. I will adjust that. I don't know. I'll figure out what to put in there. But anyway, thanks for popping in. Have a great weekend. I'm going to be traveling this week, so I may end up stopping a few places to get books. They have me traveling for 3 to 4 days again for work, and hopefully it'll be another month before I have to do that. Yeah, it knocks me out of a lot of stuff here. But anyway, may everybody enjoy this rainy Sunday if you got it out there. Read your comics, and everybody have a great week. Be excellent to each other.